Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for this Ask Alumni live career conversation, Upskilling for Success. This is the second in a series of live stream events planned for this year to provide our alumni community with insightful career advice and resources, especially in these challenging times. My name is Jane Wayland. I'm a member of the University of Melbourne Alumni Council. I graduated from the University of Melbourne with a Bachelor of Science, and since then I've had a varied career in publishing and management consulting. Since I joined KPMG Australia 15 years ago, I've held 5 very different roles. I'm currently the Director responsible for strategy and operations in our Innovation Solutions and Ventures practice. Before we continue, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land I am on today, the Wurundjeri, as well as the traditional owners of the land you are situated on. I acknowledge that Indigenous Australians have been custodians of the lands and waterways of Australia for thousands of years. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Our event tonight has been developed to assist recent graduates who are establishing their careers. However, whether you are taking your first career steps or looking for a change, we hope that you will find this session useful. We will endeavour to explore how to adapt to changing circumstances and set yourself up for success, with top tips for job seeking during difficult times. We will look at what recruiters really want from candidates and what soft skills are and why they are critical for success. We are joined online tonight by Professor Simon Bell, who, as well as being a Melbourne alumnus, is the head of MSpace, the University of Melbourne's School of Professional and Continuing Education. With a focus on academically rigorous research to solve real-world problems, Professor Bell has worked extensively with industry, government, and third sector organisations in a research, consulting, and executive education capacity. He has worked with organisations locally and internationally, including PwC, Honda, Royal Mail, Rolls-Royce, Agricultural Bank of China, and IBM. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you.
Also with us tonight is Craig Fuller, who graduated with a Bachelor of Commerce in 1983. Craig is an entrepreneurial business leader with extensive experience in innovation, marketing, and operations, supply chain, financial, and general management, both in Australia and overseas. Craig joined Amazon in Japan 5 years ago and then returned to Melbourne in 2018 to join the Amazon Australia team. And last year he became Director of Operations. Thanks for joining us, Craig.
Thank you.
From Singapore, we have Bonnie Law. Bonnie graduated in 2012 with a Bachelor of Commerce and is currently a talent generalist at Airbnb in the Asia Pacific region. Bonnie has 8 years of experience in HR, having worked in both Australia and Singapore, with extensive expertise in talent management, performance management, and people analytics. Good to have you with us, Bonnie. And from Hong Kong, Jonathan Hunt, who graduated from the university with a Bachelor of Arts in 2009, majoring in psychology and German. Jonathan then went on to complete an Executive Master of Arts in 2012. Jonathan moved to Hong Kong in 2015 with Allegis Global Solutions, a leading global provider in talent solutions, where he is the Asia Pacific head of HR. Since graduating, Jonathan has focused his career on all aspects of human resources, including outplacement, diversity and inclusion, and employee engagement. And he is passionate about assisting people in every stage of their career. As you can see, our panellists have navigated a range of career experiences, and they are here to share these insights with us tonight. We've had some questions submitted in advance, and we'll seek to cover some of them during the session. You're also welcome to pose questions through the Q&A window. We have set aside some time at the end to answer these questions. So thanks once again for joining us today, Simon, Craig, Bonnie, and Jonathan. Looking forward to the discussion.
Likewise.
So To start us off, I'm going to pose the first question to Bonnie, and then our panellists will chime in. So Bonnie, what are the most important skills that employers are looking for?
Yeah, thanks, Jane. So, when I reflect on this question, I come from, from my perspective in HR, but also as a candidate looking for jobs. And what I consistently see, no matter what industry, no matter what level of role or function, employees are looking for leadership skills. And so what I mean by leadership skills, if we break that down, it's not about, necessarily leading others or managing others with authority. But what I mean by that is being able to unify a group of people towards a common goal and achieve outcomes, right? So in terms of skills or competencies that kind of fit under that, you think about influencing skills, communication, being able to have self-awareness around how your actions, your behaviors impact others. And that's really important. And the reason why employees look for this is because essentially organizations employ people to achieve outcomes, to get things done, right? So they need people to be able to navigate what's happening inside the organization. And it gets tricky when there are limited resources, there's competing priorities, there's multiple stakeholders, the environment in which that organization operates changes. For example, right now we're in a very challenging time with economic downturn. And so being able to navigate through all of that and being able to drive for results through people with collaborating with others is very important.
I think that's a really important point to really define what we do mean by leadership skills. And I think influencing and communication sounds really key.
Right.
I'd add to that. Sorry, Jane. I was just going to say I'd add to that with just this notion of adaptability and flexibility. I feel like the more, certainly in the research that I've done on frontline employees and the challenges they face today, more and more they're being asked to deal with difficult and oftentimes intractable situations in services context, for example, where a lot of the work that was done before is now automated. That leaves only the difficult situations for them. And so in some sense, this ability to kind of think on the spot, to improvise, to demonstrate that flexibility and adaptability, and to your point, Bonnie, to solve problems, which in itself is a demonstration of leadership. As you say, you don't have to have a number of reports in, but if you take charge of a situation in your organizations and move towards solutions, that's leadership. And so I would add adaptability, flexibility, but certainly leadership, to your point, Bonnie.
I'd like to chime in here as well. I think there's so many different skills that employers are looking for at the moment. I think Bonnie and Simon, you've touched on quite a lot. I think just to continue on from Simon, the adaptability and flexibility, I think this is more critical than ever before. So I think just look at the amount the world has changed over the last year. For me in Hong Kong, this started in mid-year last year with the protests, and then evolved into the COVID situation as we have at the moment. So those that have been really successful in my organisation are those that have been able to flex and move where the work is. People have been asked more and more to work outside of their standard job description. So you say this is the things that I'm supposed to be doing day to day. There's probably going to be 10 or 12 things on top of that you're asked to do. And those that are willing to take on the additional tasks, if they don't have the skills at hand, they're willing to upskill themselves. They're the ones that are going to be the most successful in an environment like today.
And Jonathan, have you yourself got a bit of lived experience of adapting your skills?
Yeah, I do. So, I mean, I've been with Allegis for over 8 years now. I've actually had 5 different jobs in the time that I've been with Allegis. And I think when I started out, I had not really any clue what the world of work meant, what the different roles were within HR. And I've worked my way through the organisation just by really speaking to lots of people in the company. I've had a few jobs that I've probably not loved. I've really struggled in some of them, but I've been able to speak with people in the organisation, ask people what the important skills are to move into a different role. And then from there, I've done a lot of work in my own time, just upskilling myself. So doing things like reading online. There's a lot of articles, there's a lot of podcasts, there's free videos. There's so many things that you can do in your day-to-day job. And I think for me, it was really understanding what skills I lacked in order to move within the organisation. I think there's probably a few people on this call that can speak to that as well.
That's fascinating. Thank you, Jonathan. Good. Five different roles. That's really quite diverse, isn't it, in that amount of time?
Yeah.
And how does that compare to your observations, Craig, in the organisations you've worked in Japan and in Australia and elsewhere?
Yeah, no, without a doubt that flexibility and adaptability is absolutely critical. It's a bit of a cliche these days to talk about the global village, but more and more we've got on this call, someone in Singapore, someone in Hong Kong, people based in Australia, just shows you the diversity and geographical span that people are sitting in and jobs are being done. So moving to a foreign country is an exciting opportunity, but it requires a high degree of adaptability to sort of make it work and you to be a valued employee. But thinking about that question around important skills, the way I sort of think about it is that there's skills that potential job candidates need to think about in the resume stage so that their resume stands out and is attractive. And then there's a set of skills that need to be showing in the interview phase if they get that far. And then there's certain skills that they need to be having sort of in the job and demonstrating in the job for career progression. And the authentic character of the individual's got to sort of flow through those three key distinct components. But it's very important that the messaging that the individual is thinking about in each of those stages reflects the important things in that stage. And, at Amazon, we get hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes to the jobs that we post. And we don't these days have people, reading a lot of those resumes. They're very much, read, and artificial intelligence sort of plays a role, and we sort of skim and select out the resumes. So, thinking about tailor making and putting the verbiage in your resume that's going to resonate with the particular employer that you're working for is really important. And that's a real skill there, to be able to tailor your message to the employer that you're trying to target as a potential employer of choice that you're looking for.
That's a really important point. I imagine many of the people joining us tonight are thinking exactly that, Craig. Like, how can they best get through that initial stage of a resume being scanned?
Yeah, and I think there's generic skills around persuasion, collaboration, leadership, those type of things. But in an organisation like Amazon, we've got very strong leadership principles, and so how you can reflect and sort of demonstrate capability around some of those key leaderships is a really important thing to do in that writing the resume and writing the covering letter to the resume, in getting yourself at least being considered for a role.
Can I ask, Craig, we talked a lot about the soft skills, but I recall, I think late last year, middle of last year, Amazon announced about $1 billion Aussie dollars that would be dedicated towards upskilling the Amazon workforce in more technical skills, coding and AI and so forth. Where do you, and perhaps this is for everyone here, just occurred to me as you've talked a lot about soft skills, but you're working in, a really high-tech organisation. How do you sort of fall on that question about the importance of these sorts of skills, or upskilling in some of these areas like robotics or AI or
it's a really good question, because it gets back to this thing where, you've learned certain things in your university degree that's going to give you certain skills to at least be considered. But at the end of the day, it's the on-the-job skills that you're going to get and the training that you get, particularly in those very specific fields. You know, the type of languages we use in our coding, the way we think about artificial intelligence, the way we manage big data are very specific to Amazon. And so we put a lot of on-the-job training and education into, you know, new hires to make sure that they get the relevant skills and capabilities to really add value. And as Bonnie said, you know, you're there to produce an outcome. And we recognise that universities sort of give a generalist type of, you know, set of skill sets, and then we've got to take that and then really drive the individual to make sure that they're a productive, valued employee and you know, working in a way that's going to be beneficial for customers and beneficial for the you know, the long-term success of the company.
And if we think about some of those skills that are applied once you've got in the door, one that came up a bit when we were all talking to prepare for this discussion was collaboration. And I wondered, how is that playing out in this complicated environment that we're in right now for some of the organisations that you're all working for?
Well, certainly.
Yeah,
sorry, Craig, after you.
No, go Simon.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you know, I think the point around collaboration and I was going to raise actually Craig's point about this global village idea. It's not a cliche; it's the reality. You're dead right, Craig. And the fact is that you're as likely to be working with your opposite number in New York and Shanghai as you are with your colleague down the hall. And I think because it's not just that it's remote, there's different cultural imperatives, time zones, different kind of norms, even microcultures from one office to the next. And all of those things you need to be sensitive to I think to succeed in collaborating across boundaries and borders. So it couldn't be, and even in academia, the same sort of thing. The best research that you see these days is oftentimes a collaboration across borders. I have one colleague at Cambridge University, one at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and then there's me. Our research just circles the world, continually, and work gets done remotely on this joint project, but it can only happen, I think, if you have a sense of your team, the challenges that each are likely to face, whether you can foreshadow those, whether you have the emotional intelligence or self-awareness to short-circuit those sorts of failures or potential roadblocks, and then the job gets done. So I think it is absolutely essential, Jane, this notion of collaboration.
Yeah, and I'll just add to Simon's point there around collaboration. I think what's really essential now, especially since a lot of us are working remotely, and again, cross cultures, cross geos, is being able to, the ability to build trust, right? So before, when we were all working in offices, it was easier to do that. You could ask someone for a coffee, you could go out for a meal, you could kind of connect on sort of like that more intimate level of getting to know that person as a human. And in the virtual setting, it is harder. You do have to put a lot more effort into it. You have to be a lot more intentional. So that in itself as well, when it comes to collaboration, is really important to be able to build trust, across cultures, across different generations. There's multi-generational workplaces now. So very important to be able to do that and demonstrate that.
Yeah, great. So we've talked here about a number of what we might call soft skills, as well as some of the technical skills. I'd like to draw our conversation now to why these are valuable skills and why organisations see them that way and how they put into practice. So Bonnie, you've just mentioned building trust in a different way. Simon and Craig, you both talked about different cultures, but what is it that's common across some of these organisations about the application of putting these into practice? Jonathan, would you like to kick us off?
I don't think Simon was going to say something then. I need to gather my thoughts.
Okay, Simon, you're up.
I was going to share a story about some work that I did with a really large law firm in Australia, and now they're all global, it seems. So this is a large firm. You've got partners of this firm who have all been promoted based on being the best lawyer. And indeed, this is how a lot of law firms would recruit. What did you get an H1 in tort? Law also. So it was sort of, this is sort of how we'd recruited. And what I was finding in working with this firm is that what these partners needed to be able to do when they arrived at partners, they had spent almost none of their time through their life developing through that first 10, 15, 20 years of their career. And these were those skills around interpersonal relationships. It was on the partner's shoulders to grow the business, to build relationships, to innovate in service processes and these sorts of things, all of which require, again, relationship building capabilities, empathy, communication, etc. It also requires a set of critical faculties. Why isn't this working? How can we do it better? Analytical capabilities. Why is our firm not as profitable as it was last year? These sorts of things, none of which have anything to do with your legal training. And I think coupled with those imperatives was the fact that the actual work was drying up. Discovery in a law firm, for example, is done by AI. Instead of reading sort of 50,000 pages of documents from a case, it gets scanned. That gets done for you. And so the work of being a lawyer was changing fundamentally. Not just that you had to do that to then do the next bit. It's that the things you did don't exist anymore, and yet the things you need to do we're not trained in. So to me, that was a really a stark awakening for me about the changing nature of work, even within your own career, within a firm. Saying nothing of the fact that the average employee nowadays will have 5 different industries or careers with 17 different jobs, or I know that number gets thrown around a bit. Even if it's 12 and 4 or 21 and 6, it's still a ridiculously different situation to mine, which is 2 employers, 1 career. So, but I'm a dinosaur. So, but yes, I think to that point around, having to, I don't even know what your question was now, Jane. I've just gone on a little side rant, but and Jonathan, you dropped me in it there. So, but I
saw your head moving.
Yeah. But no, I do think, to your point, I think we've got to be hyper aware of the kinds of skills we need to develop, not just for the next quarter or next year, but for the next 5 to 10. I think that's pretty key.
Yeah, and coming back to your question, Jane, around why companies why these kind of skills are so important, I think, as Simon said, the world of work is changing so rapidly. Work is getting more and more competitive. So I think if I look on LinkedIn every day, there's new companies opening up. I see people change jobs all the time. So there's lots more companies competing for the same work. So therefore, companies need to do things better. We need to have a more engaged workforce that are more committed, that are able to problem solve and able to find innovative ways of solutions to solve clients' problems, essentially, or customers' problems. So I think ultimately it comes down to everyone in an organization having the skills to work together, to collaborate, to problem solve new solutions and evolve in a way that's going to keep them relevant, keep the company relevant, and keep it profitable, essentially.
That's great. And Jonathan, how would you identify that type of skill set when you're looking at a new hire? Does it stand out? Is it hard to see it on paper? Do you need to meet someone and have them in the business for a while before you can see it evolve?
Yeah, look, it is really hard to see on paper. So I think, to Craig's point earlier, I think getting your CV in a position where it does get beyond the technology and gets into a recruiter's hand is really critical. So do be wary of buzzwords and make sure that you are thinking about these things to get in front of a recruiter. But essentially, when you do, for me, when I'm interviewing people, that's when I can really tell when someone is likely to be successful or not. So, and when I'm interviewing people, I always look for problem-solving skills. I I want to see where they've used their experience. And look, a lot of people in this call will be fresh graduates, or you'll be current students. You might not have much work experience, but I can tell you, you've all got persuasion. You've all been persuading people in things that you've done in your volunteer work or in your studies. You've all been collaborating. You've all been problem solving. So there's all these things that you've been doing. So I want to hear how people have been learning these things without actually being in the workforce. And those that really impress me can say, actually, in my studies, I did this, or in my volunteer work, I did that. And then I can tell that they've got the right mentality to be successful.
Great.
So, Jonathan.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. Maybe people may be aware that, you know, Amazon wants to be and is, I think, one of the Earth's most customer-centric organizations. You know, we're very customer obsessed. And to do that, it requires amazing collaboration across the world to achieve, because what we're trying to do is take invention and then scale it so that the customer experience is amazing. And you can't actually do that unless you've got people who are, first of all, willing to collaborate, because you've got to be able to share knowledge. And then you've got to have a degree of persuasion to say, well, hey, look, we think this good idea is going to work in different geographies for the customer benefit. And then there's certain nuances in every country, because, you know, people in Australia, there's some fundamental differences to the way we think and we act to other countries. So there's got to be a bit of adaptability in the application. But at the end of the day, you know, if you've got that common focus around about how can we be very customer obsessed, how can we take good ideas and scale them, how can we leverage the technology we've got to create that customer experience, then that's what's going to really drive it forward. And that's why looking for people who've got those skills around collaboration, adaptability, flexibility are so important, because they come back to how do we deliver on behalf of the customer.
There's a definite theme there with what Jonathan was saying about solving the problem for the customer, Bonnie talking about outcomes, and Craig talking about the customer obsession. It's certainly, I think, you know, the concept of customer experience has been a popular one for a while now, but sort of taking that down and understanding what that means for an individual and articulating it is a very interesting and important angle to think about when you're thinking about the skills that you need to hone. So maybe we should also talk about how you can hone those skills when you're job hunting or seeking and you're not necessarily in an organisation. Jonathan, you mentioned as you're a student. Simon, I think we should start with just a little bit of insight to what M-Space is all about in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking on our mission as I've been listening to my fellow panelists, and actually having a cheeky look in the Q&A chat while we go. And, you know, it is difficult. I think some of the themes in the Q&A is, you know, how do I show this skill that I've got, or how do I communicate it? And I think Craig's touched on the first step, which is just, you know, get the messaging right in the CV, and start by writing an application for the company you're going for. I mean, demonstrating a skill set is not about a cookie cutter approach to sort of, you know, sending a CV out and hoping one sticks. I mean, it really does take a lot of hard work up front to make sure that the way you write your letter, the way you craft your CV suits the firm you're targeting. All that work up front will pay dividends. You'll have more than 1 in 100, or you'll get 12 in 100, or you know, something an order of magnitude better. So I think that's a first start. I mean, what we're doing though is trying to look at where these skill gaps are in the economy, in society more generally, and trying to help by providing the kinds of approaches to learning, these bite-sized chunks. We'll all have heard, I'm sure, of the notion of a micro-credential. That word's been used a lot. There are not that many really good examples of this in practice. And in fact, if you look around, everybody's out doing their own thing when it comes to micro-credentials, Melbourne included. But what we do agree on across the board, whether it's universities, whether it's IBM who are providing micro-credentials to the market, or Google, or these sorts of firms, is that this notion of a bite-sized chunk of learning is the theme. And I think that has to be the case now. You can't go back to do a master's when the industry pivots toward AI next year, and then in 5 years' time heads towards robotics, and you've you've got to do another master's. That's just not going to work. If you know what we're saying, there's 17 different jobs, 5 careers, you don't have the time to do a 2-year master's each time, but you may have a chance to drop into these micro credentials. And so what we're doing at MSpace, the Melbourne School of Professional and Continuing Education, is acknowledging that there's this huge opportunity for Melbourne to be helping people beyond their 3+2 undergraduate masters portion of their life, and their next 55 years, if you like, or 60 years of their work life. We need to be there with them. And so micro credentials, we've actually just launched. They're about 40 hours of learning, not 40 hours of video or chat or online work. Could be reading, it could be your assessment, the kinds of problems you solve to earn the credential. And literally, you'll only take away 1 or 2 things from these. I mean, there's only a small amount of time, so we're not over-promising on what you take away. But importantly, we're making sure that what you deliver in your assessment stays with you. It's embedded in the credential, in the badge, if you like. It stays with you wherever you go, whether it's on LinkedIn, it can be interrogated by an employer. They can even look at the thing you built, the artifact as we're calling it, whether it was a presentation to camera, whether it was a written document, whether it was an artistic expression or something. We've got micro-credentials outside of business, of course. And that's evidence of you having achieved that level of understanding. And that's a bit different for Melbourne, because what we've done is we've trained students in critical thinking and their ability to develop and personally grow, and you get marks along the way. But we've never really connected your H2A in principles of marketing with how good a marketer you are. And this is different. These micro-credentials are saying, we'll take you from, 4 to 8 on this scale of understanding, I don't know, data analytics or managing team conflict. And at the end of it, you can say hand on heart, I understand the notion of team conflict and how it can be resolved, and here's the evidence. And I think that's the real innovation for Melbourne Uni. We're really excited about the microcerts, and hopefully that they do start to meet this need of our alumni, but the workforce more generally.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Simon. I'm really interested in how that is considered and applied from our talent management professionals who are on the panel tonight and thinking about their own careers. So, Bonnie, you've had quite a diverse career, not just here in Australia and Singapore, but in the industries you've worked in. And have you noticed any patterns in your talent management career that have that would be able to draw on some of these micro certs that we're starting to see?
Yeah, I think what we do, certainly at Airbnb and also at my previous employer at Mondelez, was, being able to have, like what Simon says, like bite-sized capability training on specific skills. So it could be on, presentation skills. It could be how to storytell really well, looking at how to analyze data and be able to showcase that and present a story around it. So definitely, I think being able to, acquire skills that are, in a more bite-sized format definitely works, I think, within the organisation as well. But I just wanted to go back to your original question, Jane, acknowledging that it is a tough time for young people, especially unemployment rate, we expect to go up. And I'm sure many people on the call are wondering, how can they build the skills that we're all talking about today outside of a job? And Jonathan, he touched upon, volunteering, community work. There's also opportunity, if you feel that you've been underemployed, you've been trained in a certain area, but you've been pushed into, a role that you may not enjoy or you may not feel leverages your strengths and your training, be observant in that environment about the things that you feel can be improved. Be in that role, look at areas where you feel like things can be improved, that you can, offer suggestions, enhance processes, think about new ways that we could do things differently. And that in itself is a way you can demonstrate how you've been able to be resilient, to be able to adapt and to, be an asset to an organization. Another way I can think of is that, we're all, particularly those in Melbourne, we're all at home under lockdown. And today, there are many ways that you can still demonstrate some of these skills and build these skills through online platforms. You can go on Shopify and you can create an e-commerce site in like a day. And so for me, if someone came for an interview and they were to say, I was looking for a job, I was out of a job for several months, but I went and monetized a blog or whatever it could be, and they were able to tell the story around how they came through and were resilient and was able to triumph over that. I think that would be very impressive, and definitely would be the sort of person that we would love to have in our organisation.
What a great example! I love it. I must go and try to do that this weekend. I don't think I've ever. Jonathan, just some of that ring thinking about.
Yeah, I think there's so much that Bonnie just said there that resonates with me. Look, it is a really tough time. I think it's one thing I'd say for everyone on this call, and I'm constantly reminding myself, is that it is really tough right now. It's okay to be feeling down, and it's a really important that you're taking the time to understand your emotions and understand how you're feeling. So I think it all comes back to this self-awareness and the emotional intelligence. So I think it's really important when times like this as well to do some self-reflection, really spend some time understanding what things you're good at, understand what things you love, understand, to Bonnie's point, what things you can do in your current role to grow and develop your skills, but also just understanding what skills you don't have, put them down on paper. I think that's really important so that you can say, okay, I know that I need to work on these things. Might not be now, might be next year, it might be the year after, but having them written down, I think, is really important. So I think if you're struggling, take the time and just really put some self-reflection time for yourself and really understand what your strengths are, what things you love, and what gaps you have, and then try and reach out to as many people as you can to build on those development areas.
That's a really interesting point to end on there, Jonathan, talking about the networks that you have and how you might make the most of them. Certainly for me, I've really always sought out a little bit of a pattern of mentors, people I can sound things out with who might not be in your own organisation but might have come from others. And I'm really enjoying now when people talk to me through the Ask Alumni program, because you can have such diverse conversations and they're valuable both ways. Mm-hmm. So to me, talking to people and feeling comfortable to say, hey, I'd love to chat to you for a little bit, is certainly something that I'd encourage people to feel comfortable to do. Have any of you had good experiences with your networks through your own careers?
I think almost undoubtedly, and in fact, almost anything that's been good in my career, and I attribute to the advice of others. I don't want to. I mean, I've worked hard, and I hope that I know what I'm doing. But when you really look at the way my career's unfolded, it's almost entirely been due to advice I've acted on. It's been due to my willingness to ask a question about how to tackle a certain problem. It's a cold, dark, lonely place on your own in the big wide world. Go and latch on to people who are a bit older, a little bit of grey hair perhaps doesn't hurt. If one of my first mentors said, look, it's funny, people say, Colin, why do you have such a good network? He said, well, I've just been around a lot longer. And that's actually the truth. You do build your network as you get older. And I can imagine some of our attendees tonight thinking, well, I don't have that network. How do I go about it? Well, Jane, like you say, reach out, ask an alumnus, and get that ball rolling. And you might introduce this person to another who might be able to help them in a different way, and away you go. I think the answer is absolutely the network helps you.
Definitely. And I have a friend who, so he recently found a job after many months of being out of a job. And so was super excited for him that he found a job. And I asked him, what really helped? And he said that referrals was one aspect that really helped him. He said that 75% of his interviews that progressed were from a referral. My job that I'm in today was through referral as well. So do invest in your networks. Most organizations have some sort of expedited process for people that come through referrals. So that's one way you could, potentially get an edge whilst you're looking for a job. And also, to Craig's earlier point about hyper-tailoring your resume, for me, when I was looking for a job, after I graduated, I wasn't getting much traction at all until I got myself a mentor through the University of Melbourne. She helped me package up the skills that I had and taught me how to, look at the resume, look at the job description, look at the keywords, and then just package my skills accordingly and match that so that, if it's an AI robot looking at my resume, or if it's a recruiter who's only got 7 seconds to scan through my resume, they're looking at my resume and they go, okay, she's on to the next round. And, that's sometimes a leg up that you need.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
I think one thing that Jonathan said that really resonated with me is that, finding things that you love and you're passionate about is so important, and chasing those. Because you're in it for a long time. I mean, I'm getting towards the end of my career and I've been passionate and loved everything I've done in it. And it sort of stimulates me and keeps me going. And I think that's, a really good starting point. So to with Jonathan's point, knowing that is really important. And then, as Simon and Bonnie just said, then leveraging all the network you've got, all the resources, all the referrals is just important. And, you take someone like Amazon, if you can just find someone who can just give you an insight into how we think about leadership principles and how you might use those in the interview process, it just gives you a leg up and a real big step forward. So I'd really encourage that as well.
And just, I'll give a couple of 2 cents here. Look, just on your network as well. I mean, I can't say enough how important a network is. Again, start with whoever friends, family, uncles, aunties, whoever can help you. Just have a chat to them, be curious, ask them what they do. You're probably not going to land your dream job straight away. My first job out of uni was terrible and I hated it, but I worked my way from there and found myself into a really, really great job, which I am in now, and I'm really grateful it's all been through my network. But I guess one piece of advice on this is be comfortable asking for feedback. Be comfortable showing someone your CV. Be comfortable doing a practice interview with the family and friends. I know it's awkward. No one likes doing it. Practice doing a presentation in front of your family. Again, all these things are going to help you when you're interviewing, when you're putting yourself out there. So practice on people that you love, and be comfortable asking for feedback and taking it, because it's tough receiving constructive feedback, but yeah, it's a good skill.
Very good advice. So I think we'll now transition to some of the questions that we've had from our participants tonight. The first questions actually come for you, Bonnie. How can people demonstrate flexibility through their resume?
Yeah, I think we've sort of touched upon and covered some of this. So maybe I can share. So before I was talking about packaging, right, your skill, right? So I'm not sure if the people on the call have heard about STAR, like the STAR framework. But say in your resume, if you look at a job description and it says we're looking for people who are adaptable, resilient, definitely have under each role that you've been in something around, you know, overcoming maybe, you know, there was a downturn in sales or something, and you were able to come up with a new process to engage with customers and consumers, and then maybe have some hard data around that to see, you know, what was before and what was after. That in itself can show adaptability. Like, what was the change? What did you have to adapt to? What was your influence on that situation? And then what was the result, right? So I know in a resume, you kind of have to compact all of that into writing, but where you can just have dot points, you know, was able to turn this situation around, you know, that will definitely be able to help you. I'm curious to hear what Jonathan thinks about this as well. I'm sure you've seen many resumes in your day.
I have. Look, it's a really tricky one. Demonstrating soft skills on a CV, particularly if you're fresh out of university, I'm not going to lie, it is really tough. But it's around demonstrating, again, look at the things that you have done whilst you've been looking. So it's in a cover letter explaining whilst you were unemployed or whilst you were looking for work, these are the things that you're doing. So it's you were flexible in that you took on additional courses, you did the micro learnings, or that you applied to be part of a mentorship program. Again, it is tricky, but again, the more that you can demonstrate that you've been doing to upskill yourself and to kind of move yourself forward, the better.
Great. So the next question actually extends on that one. How can people demonstrate leadership, problem-solving skills within a resume? Are there any keywords which may be helpful?
I guess I'll kick off just with, I guess probably leadership is an easier one. I think you can certainly talk about, if you're in a hospitality role, you can talk about any supervisory work that you've done, any mentoring that you've done outside of work. So those sorts of things, I think are easier to say. I'm not sure if someone wants to take the second half of.
Yeah, definitely if you've had experience, you know, if you're in a role or in a previous role where you've been able to lead or contribute to cross-functional projects. So being able to work through, you know, different, people with different perspectives and being able to still lead an outcome through that. It could also be, you know, if you've ever led, you know, cultural kind of projects. Most organizations have some sort of like employee engagement survey. So from that, there will be action planning from getting all the insights. So, you know, if you've been able to put your hand up to lead some of those initiatives, that is a great way to demonstrate that you've been able to, you know, demonstrate leadership skills.
Yeah, I would say that we've almost there'd be no one in our room here who hasn't worked in a team. There would be no one, and there would be no employers who would imagine that that there are any teams that can operate conflict free. Teams are a conflict crucible. You know, now it doesn't all have to be sort of throwing each other through plate glass windows or anything, but we're talking about could be mild, minor issues of conflict or that needed resolution, and so given that that's the case, and given that everyone on the call has been in a team environment, there's your story, there's your vignette, there's your little ability to demonstrate. And I would actually underscore Bonnie's point about make sure that there's some measure there, some sort of tangible uplift. You know, did you compress the project from 6 to 4 weeks, or was it blowing out and then you managed to reel it back in time, or did you have was there an uplift in sales, or if you are in a job? As a result, try to tie it to some metric, because I think businesses like to see that you can play out the soft skills to the metrics that ultimately keep them in business.
Great.
Yeah, I'm a little bit old school in that I quite like seeing sport in people's resumes, whether they've played a leadership role in sport. But I think the reason why it's a bit old school is that people who engage in sport have got resilience, they've learned a sense of turning up, they've got a sense of practicing before performance, and so there's lots of things in that sort of play out in the workplace that just resonates with me. But that's probably just my bit of an old school thought on that. But as Simon said, anything that you can tie to how you've done something that's led to an outcome is good to see.
Fantastic. The next question we've got here is, do we have any advice specifically for international students? What skills should they highlight more?
I would just say one thing, and I don't think this is the answer that they're looking for, but there's this presumption that an international student has to learn how things happen here. Don't forget what you bring to the company from your country of origin. You bring an incredible insight, depth of experience that you can bring to your organisation. Package that up and let them know how that will help the organisation. Whether it's understanding the Indonesian buyer or something like that, or if it's about cultural norms in Western China, whatever it is, you bring that to the organisation. You bring different ways of dealing with conflict. For example, every culture, international culture that I can think of has a peculiarity or a cultural sort of norm that maybe we don't have that we could benefit from. And I think just trust in that in the first instance. But that's not really answering the question. But certainly don't downplay what you already know, what you bring.
Fantastic. I think that's probably true to my experience as well, Simon. We're operating in a global environment constantly, and we expect that the diversity of cultural experience and knowledge is brought for the benefit of the organisation. I think to borrow a phrase from Craig, I think it is a little old-fashioned to think otherwise, but it is certainly something that I would look for as an attribute. I think maybe what the question might be trying to drive at is, are there some skills around those soft skills that might need to be a bit more focused in some environments? So maybe, Craig, is that something that you've experienced having worked and run organisations overseas and locally? Is that something particular to Australia?
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm stereotyping, so because everyone's an individual and everyone's different. But there are, like when I was working in Japan, one characteristics of the Japanese is that they're conservative and they don't necessarily express their true opinion, and particularly in the workplace there's a strong sense of seniority, and so people at the more junior levels won't necessarily talk to the boss or give the boss the honest feedback that you're looking for, and that's you've got to accept that. But at the end of the day, it is all about diversity these days. I've got people in my team from, I can think of, I don't know, top of my head, 9 or 10 different nationalities and cultural backgrounds, and even you can't just say these days China, because there's some very different characteristics of someone who's grown up in Beijing or Shanghai versus someone who's come from a little bit more of a rural area, or someone who's come from a big trading center like Guangzhou or Shenzhen. So you just can't stereotype. You can't. It's all about, at the end of the day, having an open mind. What we started with, communication, flexibility, adaptability, collaboration. Those skills are just important regardless of where you're from and where you want to go. They're innate. They've got to be innate.
Sure.
Great.
Yes, just on this one, I think the only thing I can think of with the international students, why it might be different, I think is just maybe demonstrating, if you can, an understanding of the company and how they operate within Australia, and how that might be different to how they operate in your home country if they come from there. But again, that shouldn't really, we love diversity. We promote it. That's a core part of my job. As long as you can demonstrate that you can work in a team regardless of where everyone's from. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And we've actually got metrics these days on diversity and inclusion, so it's something that we measure and work on. So it's critical.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question here. What type of extracurricular activities would you recommend to do while studying to develop these sought-after skills? Sounds like Craig was sport.
Yeah, I play for Melbourne University Rugby Club, so there you go. There's my guy.
I think there was some really good comments. Jonathan, you mentioned volunteering. I couldn't agree more. I mean, and it doesn't have to be internships for, Goldman Sachs. It can be, or unpaid, if you call that volunteering. I mean, third sector organisations, not-for-profits, they're often strapped for human capital. So you'll get some really important work because they just don't have the time to do it themselves. So go for the smaller cash-strapped, third sector organisations. You'll get some great work.
I think with extracurriculars, I think just what's important is do something you love. Don't force it. I think if you can tell people do things because they think it's great on their CV. I play hockey, field hockey, and I've taken on captaincy for my club, and I've done things like that. I think demonstrating leadership and demonstrating problem solving, doing things you love, it's going to sing much more positively rather than you pretending to like something and get the skills because it's just not going to work.
Good. How about you, Bonnie? Yeah.
So at Airbnb, when we really hate to see someone go is when, not only were they really good at their job, but they were also adding to the culture. We have a lot of, like to Craig's point, a lot of organizations have diversity and inclusion councils, there may be affinity groups. And so if you're in uni and you're really passionate about a specific societal cause, or you're just really passionate about it could be anything, right? So do contribute to the university culture, do be part of those clubs, because that more and more companies will be looking for people who are driven by a specific mission, who are passionate about specific causes, and they want to bring that internally into our organization, because at the broader sense, organizations have to align to certain societal issues. So they're going to look for people who are going to help them bring them along on that journey. So start at uni, and the more you adopt more kind of wider perspectives on things, it's going to help you in your career for the long term.
Fantastic. I think that's a really good subject and topic for us to end on with our questions and answers. So thank you all for that open discussion. We're just about wrapping up now. We've run out of time, but I'd like to highlight to everybody on the call that there will be more Ask Alumni live sessions in the coming months, with the next live discussion planned for September. The topic will be, are you looking after yourself? Mindfulness, resilience, and mental focus. So keep an eye out for the communications about that. And next week for all students, there'll be a range of activities planned as part of Employability Week, including the Virtual Careers Fair on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Please make sure you look out for that. As we mentioned during the discussion, several of us have had exposure to the Ask Alumni mentoring program, so I'd like to encourage you to get involved with the program, have a one-off 30-minute conversation over the phone by video conference. So it's very convenient and it's an interesting way to connect with people. We talked a little bit about MSpace, so don't miss out on the chance to build your skills, knowledge and abilities within the University of Melbourne's wide range of professional education and development opportunities. So with micro certs and short courses, there are study options tailored to your professional needs, and the courses are designed to be flexible and fit around your schedule. So finally, thank you, Simon, Craig, Bonnie and Jonathan. It's been fascinating to talk with you and have a great conversation about your own careers and experiences to share insights with our audience. So on behalf of all who've participated in this event, I'd like to offer my sincere thank you for giving up your time and sharing your insights and advice. Until next time, everybody, goodbye and best wishes for your career journeys. Thank you.